Alright. Let's see how this goes. Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. So this series is in kind of an interesting position. Both last week's album and today's share an anniversary. I knew I was gonna cover both, so I flipped a coin to see which one would go first. Zuma won, and I'm kind of glad that it did because it gave me a little extra time to immerse myself in this album. With this episode, we are opening the door to an arc that will play out over the next several seasons on Vinyl Monday. This week, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Patti Smith Horses. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next album is gonna be, I make announcements, I host polls, you can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. Alright, this is only one of the most significant albums I have featured in the course of my series of significant albums. Let's just take the plastic off. So my copy is a repress from 1983. I bought this at a record fair last year along with a truly fiscally irresponsible amount of records. You know how it goes. Now let's talk about this cover art. The Horses cover is the perfect visual union of the relationship between Patti Smith and photographer Robert Mapplethorpe. How does one describe the relationship between Patti and Robert? They weren't friends, they weren't lovers, they were a secret third thing. They were each other's muses, living together at the Chelsea Hotel. She was his first model. He encouraged her art. She went to Paris in the 60s in hopes of learning the craft, but came back with something else entirely. Quote, I came back wholly involved in words and rhythms. These words are, of course, the basis of this album, which, of course, Robert was going to photograph the cover of. Now, I want you to think of how female singer-songwriters were marketed around 1974, 1975. Think Joni Mitchell, Melanie, Carole King, with long hair and long skirts, a kind of earthy sophistication. Quote, the cover of Horses, then, was the first victory in Smith's war on conventionality. One thing about Patti is she has impeccable taste. She styled herself in this now iconic getup. A white linen shirt with the cuffs cut off, a skinny black tie, black pants, ballet flats, a black jacket, and a horse pin given to her by Alan Lanier. And there's the haircut, modeled after Keith Richards. Quote, someone at Max's asked if I was androgynous. I asked what that meant, you know, like Mick Jagger. I figured that must be cool. I thought the word meant both beautiful and ugly at the same time. Whatever it meant, with just a haircut, I miraculously turned androgynous overnight. This haircut was copied endlessly by boys and girls, and still is today. If you look around at like 20-somethings on the train or in the grocery store, you will find at least one with the Patti Smith haircut. The photo was taken at Sam Wagstaff's apartment for its natural light. Now, by the time Patti and Robert got to Sam's apartment, they were already losing light. Robert had her pose against a wall next to a prism in the apartment in hopes it'd throw some more light. He was right. It cast this nice big triangle across Patti's body. He had her take off her jacket and put it over her shoulder to follow this visual line, and in just 12 shots, Robert got the winner. Patti said, quote, whenever I look at it now, I never see me. I see us. On Horses, we of course have the one and only Patti Smith on lead vocals and serving as principal lyricist. She is backed by Lenny Kaye on lead guitar, Ivan Krall playing double duty on guitar and bass, Richard Soule on piano, and J.D. Doherty on drums. Our special guests include Tom Verlaine playing guitar on Break It Up and Alan Lanier playing guitar on Elegy. If you somehow haven't heard a familiar name yet, this should be one. Horses was produced by John Cale. Roll transition. Rock and roll is a dream soup. What's your brand? Mine is turned over. Mine is almost at the bottom of the bowl. Early Arthur Lee, Smokey Robinson, Blonde on Blonde. It's gone. The formula has changed. Brace yourselves, there is going to be a lot of quoting Patti this week, because for all the people who have written about Patti, no one has written about Patti better than Patti. While the sentiment of the previous quote may feel familiar to this channel, ladies, gentlemen, cretins of caves, and Johnny, we are not in Kansas anymore. Gone are the days of happy hippie Laurel Canyon paradise, the Fab Four and all their followers, and the proggers in their sequin capes and shit. This is New York in the early 1970s. Patti Smith had been around for a solid minute. She came to New York during the Summer of Love, 1967. By 1970, she's fully accepted, even essential to, the Chelsea Hotel crowd. She writes, works at bookstores, hangs around Max's Kansas City with Robert in hopes of getting Andy Warhol's attention, and takes part in other artistic endeavors, including acting. Quote, "After failing as a believable lesbian in Identity, I decided that if I was going to take the stage again, it would be as myself." Pretty ironic considering her transition from poet to rock and Rimbaud began with writing a character that was pretty much herself. As if being a multi-hyphenate wasn't enough, she's also moonlighting as a music journalist. She has her work published in Cream, and right now she's gearing up to write a piece on the Holy Modal Rounders for Crawdaddy magazine. While writing this piece, she strikes up a relationship with Holy Modal Rounders drummer Slim Shadow, who is actually playwright Sam Shepard, who is married. And then Patti and Sam write a play about their affair that Sam casts his own wife in, then he f***s off to Nova Scotia. Yeah, no time to waste in this story. At the same time as all of this, Patti meets Bob Newworth at the Chelsea Hotel. He mentors her, introduces her to Bob Dylan, more on that later. Though her focus is starting to shift, Patti has not stopped writing. She'll put out Seventh Heaven, White, and work with Richard Hell. No wait, sorry.
And he just looked at me. Yeah, you like hell? Yeah, you saw Voidoids 100 times. You saw Voidoids 100 times.
It is a struggle to not say Richard Hell's name like that. Through writing is how she first linked up with Lenny Kaye. He was first put on her radar by way of a best of a cappella essay he wrote for Jazz and Pop. Patti recruited him with, and I quote, "Could you play a car crash with an electric guitar?" The answer was yes. Patti and Lenny bonded over their love of the single. They'd sit around for hours at the record store Lenny worked at, just listening to singles and shooting the shit. And they found common ground in being children of the 60s, wanting to return rock and roll to experimentation and inventiveness. Like setting honest-to-goodness poetry to rock and roll. Dylan's a poet, no debate needed there, but his work is meant to be in the context of a song. Jim Morrison, mostly meant to exist in the context of a song, though he did flirt with the boundary. Patti took her poetry and, over the next 3 years, enmeshed it with rock and roll arrangements. An unfamiliar context and unorthodox method, terribly compelling. It was Robert who encouraged Patti to sing more, and addition of pianist Richard Soule really solidified the poem-to-song journey. About their early work together, Lenny said, quote, "I hesitate to call them songs, but in a sense they were the essence of what we could pursue. It wasn't really meant to be a band. It wasn't meant to be anything more than just a performance, an artistic moment in time. But as it turns out, that was the moment where everything turned around for me." For longtime viewers of this series, Lenny Kaye's name might be familiar to you. That is because he assembled the Nuggets compilation. Lenny's friend Greg Shaw wrote the cream review that put Nuggets on the map. In his thank you letter to Greg, Lenny offhandedly mentioned he was playing guitar for Patti for a Bertolt Brecht birthday celebration at St. Mark's Place. St. Mark's turned out to be pretty fucking significant. There was a star-studded audience including Andy Warhol, Allen Ginsberg, Bob Newirth, Jim Carroll, Danny Fields, and of course, Robert and Sam. Patti had officially arrived. She opened with Mac the Knife and performed a verse called Omen, the opening line of which sounds familiar. Neither St. Mark's Place nor Max's Kansas City would become Patti's home base. CBGB's opened in December of 1973 as direct competition to Max's. Quote, CBGB was the ideal place to sound a clarion call. It was a club on the street of the downtrodden that drew a strange breed who welcomed artists yet unsung. The only thing club owner Hilly Crystal required from those who played there was to be new. Lenny described the CBGB's crowd as just innovative bands that were taking a step backwards to see what made a great record. Not unlike Nuggets did, toting 60s garage rock in Our Year of the Lord 1972. The main players at CBGB's were the then germinating Patti Smith and Television. The alliance between these two proved advantageous for both groups and CBGB's as a whole. Blondie really should have come up at this time as well, but they were on this bend of just terrible luck at the time. After a trip to Paris, in which Patti visited the graves of her idols Jim Morrison and Arthur Rimbaud, she connected with manager Jane Friedman, who got her a gig at the Mercer Arts Center supporting the New York Dolls. She then opens for Phil Oakes at Max's. Through these gigs, Harbor Song was reworked into Birdland, and Redondo Beach, Free Money, and Break It Up were added to the set list. Now you have to remember, these are the days of Bad Company and labels really aren't interested in signing an androgynous poet-singer and her ragtag group of lost boys. So Lenny said to Patti, why don't you just put out a single yourself? This is standard practice today. You don't even need a label to release music anymore. You can just do it all from the comfort of your bedroom. But a relative unknown jump-starting their career by self-releasing a single was unheard of in the 1970s. Lenny had done the whole Nuggets thing. He'd produced for others. He knew how records were made. With a little money from Robert Mapplethorpe, in June of 1974, Patti booked Electric Lady Studios to cut her cover of Hey Joe and an original called Piss Factory. Biographer Victor that's gonna be tough to say. Biographer Victor Bockris called Hey Joe the most important record she ever made because this plan to garner publicity worked. Sales helped finance the group's trip out to the Whiskey A Go-Go in LA, though no one in California knew who the hell Patti Smith was. While on tour that summer, the band made what turned out to be a critical decision. They cut and pasted Patti's Oath into their cover of Gloria. After the Rock and Rimbaud series of gigs in November of 1974, Lenny and Richard decided they needed more manpower. Patti and the band were outgrowing what they could do with 3 people. They put an ad in the Village Voice and found Ivan Krall, Blondie's guitarist. In March of 1975, they share a residency with Television, followed by the Festival of Unsigned Artists. This festival did work, it got RCA on the line, but they still needed a drummer. Either Tom Verlaine tipped off Patti to J.D. Doherty, or he sought out Patti himself. Either way, he made the newly minted Patti Smith Group. RCA didn't work out, but on May 1st, Clive Davis offers the Patti Smith Band a contract for his new label, Arista Records. Clive had a reputation for fostering female talent. He'd discovered Laura Nyro and snagged Big Brother and the Holding Company featuring Janis Joplin for Columbia. Later that month, the group played a set for WABI. With this radio gig, they pretty much had the set list that would become Horses. Horses was recorded September of 1975, once again at Electric Lady Studios. Sessions were overseen by John Cale of the Velvet Underground. According to Patti, in an interview with Dave Marsh, she approached John to produce purely because he looked the part. John wanted to give Patti the 1967 Nico treatment, lush and pretty with strings. He soon discovered Patti was most certainly not a Nico. He could lock Nico out of the studio and she pissed him off, and he could not do that with Patti. Quote, "All I was looking for was a technical person. Instead, I got a real maniac artist. I went to pick out an expensive watercolor painting, and instead I got a mirror." It really was like a season in hell for the both of us. Birdland was especially taxing to record for all, but Cale and Patti did eventually find common ground in bridging the gap between divinely inspired artist and disaster master. The track listing of Horses goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Gloria in Excelsis Deo, followed by Redondo Beach, then Birdland, and side 1 closes with Free Money. Opening up side 2, we have Kimberly, followed by Break It Up, then Land with subtitles Horses, Land of a Thousand Dances, and La Mer, duh, and the album closes with Elegy. Horses was released November 10th, 1975, 50 years ago, last week, and on the 84th anniversary of the death of Arthur Rimbaud. If she had a say in the release date, good shout. If not, what a fucking coincidence. Now remember when I told you to put a pin in the Dylan thing? Well, Patti very nearly made her mainstream debut as part of the Rolling Thunder Revue. Patti and Dylan met through the Goethe's Folk City / Bitter End Circle. Patti can be seen performing at Goethe's in Scorsese's Rolling Thunder film. All acts on Rolling Thunder had to use the same band. This was for logistical purposes. There were enough people on this tour as is. That was a deal breaker for Patti. No Patti Smith band, no Patti Smith. For as influential as the MC5, the Stooges, and the New York Dolls all were, none of them could make the top 50 of the Billboard albums chart. Horses did. Clearly, Patti hit a nerve with young people, including Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth. He remembers seeing one of her very first appearances in Cream. Quote, "Her work stark and striking, a raven-haired androgyne in a ripped t-shirt and black leather jacket reciting poetry in New York City. This was something to stare at. An agent of change." He's written about many gigs of hers he's been to. He interviewed her for Bomb magazine in 1996. I gotta say, reading Sonic Life was such a trip for me because Thurston writes about Patti the way I write about him. Indeed, Patti became a new kind of crush-worthy. Richard Hell said Patti was triply stunning at the time, not only because her stuff was hair-raising on the page, but because her performances were so seductive and funny and charismatic that the writing was lifted way beyond the page. Author Mark Patras said, quote, "Meriting ecstatic full-page reviews on its release and generating at least as much hate-filled bile, Horses was the album that turned the 70s on its head." I don't think that's an overestimation. There was nothing like Horses on the market at the time. Some of the bile came from Steve Lake of The Melody Maker. He was a jazz guy, so he thought the band's musicianship sucked. Patti sang off-key. They were just Velvet Underground wannabes. Surprisingly, Rolling Stone sang a different tune. John Rockwell praised Patti's command over the written word. She leaps between meanings of words like an elf across dimensions, deliberately dizzying you with crisscrossings between comfortable perceptions. You see, the sea becomes a sea. The sea of possibilities. And Lester Bangs, praise be father, wrote the review for the February 1976 issue of Cream. Quote, "She could have done this a long time ago and has been building steadily, paying dues and learning music fit for the reaches of her poetry so as, when the song is finally delivered, to fulfill all her promises." He praises Patti's delivery and ability to shapeshift to make all these characters coming from her head like Athena believable. The sophistication lies in the instinct Patti and her group act on. Quote, the general primitivism makes you realize you're a mammal again, and glad for it. That's like a cheat code for getting less to like your album. Of course, he has to loop the Stooges into this, calling Lenny's feedback solo on Birdland the best since 1969. Overall, this review comes from knowing Patti and her writing for so long, and seeing her development as an artist in real time. As quoted in Clinton Haylen's From the Velvets to the Voidoids, Patti said, Horses for me was the culmination of 4 years of thought, processes of study, of performance, of failure, building and rebuilding. It was a document of years of work. How does she feel about it now? In a Q&A just the other day for her new book's launch and 50th anniversary tour of Horses, Patti said, quote, I can still access the part of me who wrote those things. I can't say that, I want to stay there, because I've evolved, but I can still comprehend the energy and what was on my mind. So, what do I think of Horses?
Emerged perfectly. Mirror in the hallway. The boy looked at Johnny.
I want to start off this last chapter of the video with something I kind of opened up in last week's episode, that Horses shares its anniversary with Neil Young's Zuma. Though most believe the Sex Pistols releasing Anarchy in the UK was kind of the starting gun of something new, I believe Zuma and Horses was the schism in rock and roll. Visually, both reject the glitz, glamour, and excess rock and roll got caught up in, though one is an improvised drawing and the other a posed photograph. Both go black and white and minimalistic. Sonically, Zuma is totally 70s. It is a macho cocaine album born from a bachelor pad on the beach. Horses possesses a different manic energy and is androgynous. Zuma is part of a long line of succession of obsessive rebirths by an established figure. Horses is a new birth from a new figure, but with a strong rock and roll lineage. Horses explores various comings of age through the idols of Patti's coming of age. I first heard of Patti through that Rolling Thunder film, and I was captivated by her energy. A little nervous, but magnetic. But like my initial discovery of the Velvet Underground, I decided that I had to be a little older to really get what she was doing. 6 years after Rolling Thunder's release, I have patiently waited, and I'm in that position now to engage with Patti's work. Patti came from a boys' club. Baudelaire, Camus, Coltrane, Dylan, Hendrix, Brian Jones, Jim Morrison, and of course, Arthur Rimbaud. Jerry Hershey said, quote, Patti was most comfortable collaborating with, and I would add being inspired by, men. A gender preference that still has feminists and riot girls scrapping over her alleged betrayals and or revolutions. You can't ever really put a pin in this woman, and as you'll read in Please Kill Me, that inability to get a read on her really pissed some people off. In Please Kill Me, Penny Arcade said, quote, Patti lived her whole life pretending to be John Lennon or Paul McCartney or Brian Jones or some other rock star. Considering the other stories she told, this is clearly meant as a dig, but it manifests in a really interesting way on Horses. Patti has always been comfortable naming her influences, to the point where it feels as though she's got a deep well to pay back to them, but we hear her grow out of idol worship in real time. Despite Patti's own assertions, Horses happened the way it did because of John Cale. Because he adopted the same attitude Andy Warhol had as producer of the Velvet Underground. Just sit back and let the show run. But he put the Patti Smith Band in the position where they had to fight for their music. Then the vision could take form. And what's interesting is that the vision is always shifting. Patti's gift is that she can embody pretty much anyone. Quote, with each song, Smith presents a sort of photographic negative, her characters inhabiting a shadow version of the land of the free. Our first negative is Gloria, the title. It can be drawn back to the silent friction between Patti's atheist father and Jehovah's Witness mother. Gloria in excelsis Deo, glory to God in the highest, Gloria, Van Morrison. Consider William Blake. Without contraries, there is no progression. Attraction and repulsion, reason and energy, love and hate are necessary to human existence. Patti understands this and plugs it into the very fabric of Gloria. Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. I held off on dropping this line for as long as I possibly could. Philip Shaw remembers his first experience with Gloria. Quote, recently confirmed and with a serious guilt complex to boot, the words seeped like acid into my brain, and I was gripped by an impulse to take the record off the stereo and smash it to pieces. It's an immediate, iconoclastic statement that has lost not an ounce of its power over the past half-century. We can see the darkened room. The figure in the shadows, hat tilted over one eye, the triangle of light illuminating the trail of cigarette smoke that slips out and snakes around those plaintive chords and blasphemous words, uttered low and detached. Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. These are the words of the hustler, the junkie, the whore, the mother, the gravedigger. This might be the greatest opening line in rock and roll history. Not a moment too soon, a statement of autonomy. Melting in a pot of thieves, wild card up my sleeve, thick heart of stone, my sins my own, they belong to me. Me. Sliced with guitar strums. Patti plays a few different characters on Gloria. Maybe Mark Patris insists it's all one narrator, an instant challenge to rock's ceaseless phallocentricity. There is no man in Patti Smith's Gloria. I'm not so sure. Jesus died for somebody's sins but not mine are the words of every woman who's felt being born from the rib of a man a little too hard. But we've also got the dude at the party seducing Gloria in the red dress and the male rock star. Both characters ooze with sexual energy. They're almost smarmy at times. Gloria is a perfect thesis not for the album, we'll get to that much later, but for Patti herself. Gloria exalts all her strengths. The band eases into a sway through I walk in a room, you know I look so proud. It swaggers like the character. It accentuates her delivery, a little breathy at times before sliding into the nasally and blunt. The Jersey accent is essential to all of this. You're definitely losing something with my interpretation of this because I come from a little too far north. It intensifies through the side plot with the bell tower before the song takes off. Patti's slurring and totally caught up in that energy. This band was perfect for Patti because they give her natural feel for rhythm the room to breathe. Lenny said it was why it was so easy to play with her. Lester Bangs said even if you couldn't understand a word of English, you couldn't miss the emotional force of Patti's music. JD really helps this all along. He's on the mark with those short, clipped, effective fills. What writing device lends itself to rhythm? Repetition. Don't make a drinking game out of how many times Patti Smith will repeat a line or phrase. You will fucking die. She's using these words over and over because they sound good. Who wrote lyrics purely because the words sounded good together? Bob Dylan. John Lennon. After supposedly failing to play a believable lesbian 2 years before this, Patti tries that role on again in wholly unexpected tonal shift Redondo Beach. The song is named after a gay community in the South Bay area of LA. Patti presumably heard of this place while touring California with her band. There's a reggae twist thanks to Lenny, and maybe Keith Richards too. Our narrator, a woman this time, has had a lover's quarrel with her lady at the hotel, and she flees into the night. The next morning, her body washes up on the shore, implying sweet suicide. Setting this to reggae is oddly whimsical and totally bewildering, like almost comical. It's like a pantomime telling of the story. One can imagine Patti dramatically dabbing tears from her face with an oversized hanky. Redondo Beach makes no sense when you really think about it, but that's not the point to really think about it. You can't help but get into it. The point is to feel it. The Are You Gone Gone and Turn Around are quirky and cute. This is probably the catchy number on Horses. Then comes another hard left turn and the first of Horses' 2 9-minute epics, Birdland. You know I love an album with 2 9-minute epics. Patti adapted the story of Birdland from Peter Reich's Book of Dreams. The young Peter sees a spaceship flying over the family farm and believes his father to be on it. His father has recently passed, but then the ship turns out to be a flock of birds, or something like that. UFOs were on people's brains in the 1970s. John Lennon and May Pang claimed to have seen one over their apartment in New York. Killer as the first line of this album may be, and as much fun as Gloria and Redondo are, Birdland was the one that grabbed me by the collar. The band is giving Patti all the space in the world, and this is to slip into the story. It's so evocative. I can see the empty orange-gray sky dotted with black crows over the tobacco barn. His father died and left him a little farm in New England. All the long black funeral cars left the scene, and the boy was just standing there alone. I was struck by how youthful Patti sounded through the song's exposition. She's assumed the role of a scared child. I love atmospheric, I love empty, I love surreal. Richard's deliberate steps down are as pretty as they are unsettling. It was as if someone had spread butter on all the fine points of the stars, because when he looked up they started to slip. What a beautiful way to articulate a bleak night falling on this kid's world, falling down around him. I love all of that more as it transforms into mania. As the scene gets weirder, Patti gets more and more lost in it. She gets to dry heaving. It's me, it's me. She totally lets her voice go where it wants to. And Les was right. This one-note feedback solo is killer. It whirs and whips up the scene like a ship passing by. The grass parts, the wind stings your face. Each rambling, babbling, fever dream forever verse speaking of helium, birds scattering like rose petals, and a fist piercing through the sky is anchored by, he was not human. You are not human. I am not human. We are not human. It's a little autobiographical. Patti was a tall and skinny kid growing up. She felt like an alien. Been there. It's also a simple recognition that we're all animals. I can tell you what I think makes us weird apes human. I think it's a devotion to something greater, whether that's God or rock and roll or fucking NASCAR. A manic devotion to something greater drives all of Patti's writing, Birdland included. But who's to say if I'm right? We're not immune to acting on animal instinct, especially when we're keening at the sky as we grieve. In another weird turn, this devolves into 60s girl group shoo-doo-wopping and broken English. We like Birdland. It's a regression to a childlike state, to self-soothe after this spectacular outburst. Free money is that working-class dream of winning the lottery. You sit in front of the TV set watching the game show contestants standing in the big cage where all the money flies around and you have to catch it, and then you go to bed praying for that ridiculous show business crap to happen to you. As silly and exploitative as it is free money. Really hurts not to have it, but it doesn't hurt to dream. We'll dream it for free. The music reflects that feverish want, a pursuit, a slim, scratching, effective twin guitar attack. And this song just whips right past you. After lengthy Gloria and Birdland, Free Money seems to end as soon as it begins. Kimberly is named after Patti's youngest sister. Patti was often stuck babysitting. That's just how it is when you're the oldest and both your parents have to work. The song was inspired by a 12-year-old Patti seeing the barn across from her childhood home struck by lightning and feeling this surge of maternal instinct to protect Kimberly. I knew your youth was for the taking, fire on a mental plane, so I ran through the fields as the bats with their baby-veined faces burst from the barn and flames in a violet, violent sky, and I fell to my knees and pressed you against me. The barn fire becomes this fire and brimstone religious psychosis. Crack the sky, or maybe a woman seeing visions only men are allowed to see and become saints for. I just feel like some misplaced Joan of Arc. This is another bizarre but, good instance of the Patti Smith Band setting serious shit to bopping music. And I don't know how no one else has caught this, but Kimberly is like a hair's width away from Stay by Maurice Williams and the Zodiacs.
Don't mind, and your mommy don't mind.
Break It Up was written with Tom Verlaine about a dream Patti had of Jim Morrison breaking on through. Then she frees herself from those same restrictions. After visiting Jim's grave again in I think 73, she had kinda met her idol and gotten over the worship. I felt an uncommon lightheartedness, not sad at all, she remembered. Quote, I couldn't even cry. I just stood there completely hollow. I went to Rimbaud's grave afterwards and stood there and felt totally cold. And then I just said, fuck it. I'm going home and doing my own work. It is terribly freeing to reach that point of, fuck it, I'm doing my own work now. I believe this is Patti freeing herself from the Jimmies and Jims, even her precious Rimbaud. She's ready to find her own voice now. Break It Up is a cathartic experience you have to be ready for. Of course, there's the dramatic guitars, the guys crying. Through the last ebb, that last verse, you hear her thumping her chest as she sings. She's pretty thin, so that one extended note of ice it was shining gets broken up. It's as if something clamors inside her, trying to beat its way out. It's such a physical representation of the act on the song, which we barely ever get to hear on record. I tore off my clothes, I danced on my shoes, I ripped my skin open, and then I broke through. There's a breathtaking stop time there before breaking, into the next round of Break It Ups. It just slugs this song into victory. Her voice is cracking as she howls desperately. It's violent, like ripping skin open, and it's just beautiful. This is a performance that warrants throwing flowers onto the stage. Like, I stood there and applauded after Break It Up. Kids used to flock to CBGBs to hear what happened to Johnny, like they used to flock in front of the TV set to see what happened to Superman. Johnny is the American every teen. The Johnny Be Good, the Johnny in the basement mixing up the medicine, or that poor kid who dies in like every early 60s pop song. Johnny has some near-death experience, sees the horsemen of the apocalypse, then crosses into another dimension where he finds himself at a party. He steps out into the world on his own and loses his innocence. In that Q&A I reposted on my Instagram, Patti said, "In 50 years, many things have changed. The things that Johnny saw and was concerned about 50 years ago, they seem like baby sauce compared to what Johnny is going through now. The world is complete fodder for the dark adventures of Johnny, but it's also, Johnny is joyful to be alive. He's happy to be alive. He feels his blood. He feels his energy. He feels his creative impulse. He feels his worth at the same time seeing us destroy one another or destroying our planet, the devastation of countries and hunger and all the things we're seeing, Johnny sees. This is how Land and Horses stay fresh. Different shit, same super strange energy flow. They originally went about recording in a Doors self-titled way, the whole band doing it live. But something weird happened with Land. On the first take, Patti did the singing fine, but when it came to the middle section, she froze up. The instrumental was a keeper, so Patti would overdub the vocal in 3 takes. I believe all 3 of them are used on the album version. On the second take, the Mexican boys and spaceships were gone. Instead, there was a black horse, and all those electrical wires, and a sea of possibilities. I didn't know what direction the song was taking. There was all this strange energy I didn't understand. The song is like 8 or 9 minutes long, so it's obvious I'm gonna lose control sometime, but I felt like it was The Exorcist, or someone else talking through my voice. That's when Horses as a whole opened up. Ladies, gentlemen, and Johnny, Horses is the only album I can think of where its thesis statement is its finale. John Cale recalled, "It was not clear what persona this record was going to have until I had her improvise against herself. At that point, something clicked. Land is a total loss of control, where in a sea of possibilities, the subconscious opens. It's very similar to how the end functions. The boy was in the hallway drinking his glass of tea is Patti's equivalent to the killer awoke before dawn, he put his boots on. As Patti sets the scene, punctuating each line with Johnny's name, the guitar slithers in, the overdubbing is so well done, it's scary. There's this moment in the Rolling Thunder film where Patti kind of loses where she's going with the archer and his sister. She gets nervous and kind of rambles. Then you see it in her eyes. The thing just snaps together. He starts to move in another direction. He starts to move in another dimension. You can hear this moment on land when suddenly, Johnny! Bang! The command over that name, and he starts to see the horses, and the wah-wah comes up, and the drums kick in, where Patti sees the vision. That's where the song loses control. When we get to the second movement especially, I am shocked by how deliberate each word chosen and delivered seems. When you remember all this about the sea and Johnny and the penknives is coming off the top of her head, it's nuts. Then you think the delirium Johnny experiences couldn't be written. It comes from the recesses of the mind and from an ode to the oh-so-60s dance craze. And it fits because you can't help but dance as the song just steamrolls through. The winding story comes back to humping the parking meter, where we kind of started with Gloria, and a benediction to send us off for the night, perhaps the picture Patti was studying all along. In the sheets, there was a man dancing around to the simple rock and roll song. Then you have kind of the encore elegy. It's in kind of a shit position, because literally, how do you follow up land? It's the uncomfortable in-between, having to come back down to the real world after the fantastical journey we've been on. It's spooky, and the way Patti really sings, is almost pretty. When I struggle really hard with a conclusion, I consult my texts, and of course, Lester Bangs had the answer he always seems to. He pulled through for this. He knows a fucking conclusion. With her wealth of promise and the most incandescent flights and stillnesses of this album, she joins the ranks of people like Miles Davis, Charlie Mingus, or the Dylan of Sad-Eyed Lady and Royal Albert Hall. It's that deeply felt and that moving. A new romanticism built upon the universal language of rock and roll, an affirmation of life so total. If you ask me, nothing is affirmation of life like the union of low and high culture, a bolt from the gutter that shot towards the stars, as Patras put it. Patti and her boy's arrival totally upended a certain set of sequined conventions, not unlike Warhol had. You know, the man that Patti once vied for the attention of. The lines of boy and girl, narrator, subject and spectator, dreams and reality, human and aliens and religion and the visions and real and the unreal are all blurred now. Doesn't everything seeming blurry and totally upside down feel really relevant right now? That's what growing up is. It's just like existing until upside down feels right side up again. Though Horses channels the energy of the adolescent quite a few times, it's clearly the work of a fully realized, determined, driven woman about to turn 30. She lived through the 60s and tries to make sense of all the feedback and cars and girls and crazy dancing. She's living through the 70s. Actively trying to make sense of the post-60s state of the world and also UFOs and also herself. I am not human. Now she is in her 70s, still asking those questions as she performs all this stuff live again. It shouldn't be grounded. Oftentimes our narrators on Horses lose the f***ing plot, but it's grounded. The ship lands. The fist is born through the sky. The question Horses asks is, do you want to shatter the sky? 50 years later, Horses brings the fucking sky down to ground level. My personal favorites off this one are Gloria, Birdland, Break It Up, and land. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that is it! That is Horses 50 years later. I can't believe this album has been around for half a century because it still feels so current. I don't know if you guys know this, but that was our last episode before the double album December nonsense begins again. The first leg of Vinyl Monday Season 5 has flown by. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Patti Smith? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday mornings at 11. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for double the nonsense! Bye!